in racing. It's time to recap it. And who better to do it than Michael and Magic? Two bros/pros who cover the highs and lows of racing around the globe on every one of their shows. Real fans look forward to these guys and their last dance, cause they know they're not talking out of their royal ascot. What they say makes sense. So ladies and gents, sit back and relax as Blinkers Off presents The Magic Mike Show, where you hear the experts speak. The Magic Mike Show. Tune into the show every week. The Magic Mike Show. You can trust the show is the bomb because it's being brought to you by RacingDudes.com.
What's up, everybody? I'm Magic.
And I'm Mike.
And this is the Magic Mike Show, episode 187, coming to you live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Periscope. Thank you so much for tuning in with us live. We're happy to have you here. Mr. Samich, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, man. I'm a mile and a half in that direction from Saratoga Racetrack. So, I mean, that can't be a bad thing, right? I made the trek this weekend to get up here to upstate New York. So I will be paying $10 to stand on a stool and look over the fence this weekend.
That was such a crazy. If you don't know what Mike's talking about, there was a bunch of stools and little step ladders from like Home Depot that were for sale that you could, or for rent for the day, that was along the fence on the street at Saratoga. And depending on how tall you were or how many steps you needed, the price decreased accordingly. So a real interesting market analysis of what's happening in demand at Saratoga right now.
Man, you got to get that parking money back. I mean, if you've ever been to Saratoga, these houses that live next to the track, they will sell their entire yard for parking spaces for $10, $15, $20. And so they're making hundreds of dollars a day for people to park across the street from the track in their yard. So you got to figure out how to make that money back. So I guess you just kind of go over at 5 a.m., set these stools out, and just try and get something back for it. It's crazy how much the economy actually revolves around this meet. So the upstate New York. So you're going to see a lot of people try and find some unique ways to get some money. I have not seen the "'Tis the Law" stop signs yet, which is something I definitely want to check out when I'm here. My younger self would have had the genius idea of trying to get one of them, but I'm gonna lay off that and not go after some signs up here.
God, I love those signs. I'm gonna see if I can find the one that I found because that I saw on Twitter, because it was really great. It was basically the stop all the way, and it's just "'Tis the law" all the way. So or stop all the way, "'Tis the law" underneath it. It was really great.
It's all four corners of that stop sign. So it's just that one intersection in Saratoga, and it's all four corners. And one guy did it just randomly. It wasn't like a community thing or anything. And it's pretty cool to check out. So I'm excited. I'm gonna go get my picture next to it so that when he wins the Triple Crown for us here, I can have my "'Tis the Law" picture with a stop sign.
Oh my God, you'll have to do that, and we'll Photoshop in like my head next to it, and then that'll be our first merchandise, right? It'll be our heads with the "'Tis the Law." There's no copyright issues with that, I'm sure.
No, not one bit.
Well, you look good, you look happy, and I can see the sun shining in bright for you, so that's great. It's shining here in Los Angeles too. That's why I look like a little bit of a halo behind me here to the right. If you're new to the show, thanks for joining us. Mike and I go through on Mondays and we talk about the things that we learned from the weekend of racing. So not just saying, oh, here's who won the race, but what can we take away from it as bettors and what lessons can we learn and try to, improve our handicapping and our betting moving forward. Before we get into it, Mike, what's the best thing you saw this weekend?
It's Saratoga Racetrack, man. I mean, I can't explain the nostalgia I have for this place up here. And so just driving by the track and like they've got it blocked with some black fencing essentially in front of the fence, or black screens in front of the fence. So you can't actually see into the track from outside of it. But just driving by that sign where it says Saratoga Racetrack, and then you got the red letters, the gold letters, it's just, it brings back so many memories for me that just being up here in upstate New York and be able to see that's pretty incredible. So it's nice to be back. It's nice to have Saratoga racing. It's nice to be in upstate New York. I'm going to be here. I'm following the quarantine rules, so I'll be up here for a while so I can be in a golf tournament a little bit later this month. But yeah, it's just nice to see Saratoga, man. It's one of those. It's the August place to be, Saratoga Springs, right? And I'll actually be there in August this year, so very happy about that and excited to see Saratoga racing again.
And I'm jealous. I wish I was even that close to a racetrack. I mean, it's funny you brought up the thing about the economy and how much Saratoga revolves around that. It's even more so than Del Mar, because at Del Mar's right on the ocean. So you have your normal San Diego and Los Angeles crowds that just go there for the weekend to relax. And Ohio Pit, by the way, there's a world-class, beautiful seaside race course right here. Saratoga, that's it, man. Like I've talked to Vinny. He lives really close by, and Slim's close by, and this is it for them. So it makes it that much harder when you can't go to something like this. So I can understand everybody's frustrations there.
Yeah, I mean, you have Skidmore College, which is the other quote unquote attraction in Saratoga Springs. But it's crazy if you look up like what it costs to rent a house for a month. I know multiple people in the neighborhood that my parents have a home in. They rent their house and it pays for their entire year's worth of mortgage for that one 6 week stretch where they can go on vacation. They pay for the rest of the year's mortgage renting their house for 6 weeks. So it's crazy how it really does impact everything, not just the restaurants, not just, not the things that you would know, right? That the restaurants, the track, those type of things, but the vendors from, the different people in different houses, the parking people, this is everyone's summer jobs. Everyone who's taking the tickets, everyone who's doing selling the forms. I mean, my dad literally walks from the same parking lot where he sees the same parking attendant for the last 10 years, goes in the same turnstile where he sees the same person who's taken his ticket for the last 10 years, goes to the same person and buys his form where he's the same person for the last 10 years. It's just, this is what it is here up here. And that's one of the beautiful nostalgic parts about Saratoga is it's just, you feel like you're almost going back in time every time you come back up here. And we have the same person at the top of our section where we have season tickets and she's been literally wiping the chairs for 25, 30 years every time you come to the section. It's cool things like that. And so, you miss all those people and all those people, this is what they did for the summer. And now it's not there.
That's just crazy. That's really crazy. It's great that there's that much, that many positive things and that much of a historic family feeling when you go to Saratoga that you have the same people. I know with Del Mar, I haven't been going to horse racing for 30 years, but I could tell that there are plenty of people who work at Del Mar that are in the same position. So hopefully things improve and both of these tracks can start to open up a little bit to the spectators beyond just the owners before their meets end in the summer. Best thing that I saw, man, we're going to talk about Monmouth Park. I got to hand it to Aaron. Aaron Halterman absolutely crushed it at Monmouth Park this weekend with the guide on Saturday. So first of all, there's 14 races on the card. That's a lot of work. The first 8 of those were not stakes races, and a lot of them were like
not stakes is generous.
they were the farthest thing from stakes. It's like New Jersey bred waiver claiming $2,500 non-winners of 2 lifetime. It's like, how the hell are you supposed to handicap something like that comes around twice a year that you can focus on that level? So Aaron crushed it. The early pick 5, they cashed that for over $1,100. Then they ended it with the pick 5 that paid $851, which, mind you, it was $851 singling authentic at 2 to 5. The pick 4 paid almost $300. The free picks, the on top picks, like the ones that he say, if you're gonna do nothing else to bet this horse to win, 8 for 14. Including Aquaphobia, who we're not going to talk about really getting that big grade 1 win the United Nations Stakes. How he went off at 10 to 1, I'm still very confused by that. But just the best thing that I saw is Aaron going to at a guy that he didn't feel that confident in compared to, say, like the Met Mile, the Belmont. Man, he crushed it. So hats off to Aaron. That was a great job this weekend.
Yeah, he killed it. I did the bombs from Monmouth on Saturday, and I was missing one leg every single time, and it was just here or there, ticket construction or just not having a horse like Aquaphobia. And Aquaphobia is one of those, you look at the morning line, you see 9-2, and you're like, you look up at the board, the horse goes off at 11 to 1. You're like, yeah, I would have included it at 11 to 1. Someone tell me it's going to be 11 to 1. I'm all about Aquaphobia at 11 to 1. It's Mike Maker, man. He's stolen a couple of these big time graded stakes now. I mean, he's showing up with horses that don't necessarily look like they're the perfect fit for the race, but they're running well. And that race was very interesting too. I mean, Aquaphobia, I thought he sat close to the pace, was able to just get the right trip to be able to get up in time and take out the other pace setter. So he ended up getting a great stalking trip and getting the job done. But 11 to 1, man, that price floating up from 9-2 was absolutely incredible. It's a $23 winner for her, and it's awesome, especially when you're giving out for free on your one pick in the race. That's right. Pretty darn good.
Right. So on top of that, we talked about this in the live stream, but like the Belmont guide, the Met Mile guide, Aaron got some hate mail for it because in the guide, the horses he was saying, this is who you should play to win. The most likely winner was the chalk. And it's not Aaron's fault that the chalk. Aaron's job is not to tell you, here's a 50 to 1 shot that has maybe a 0.01% chance. So you should definitely play him. Aaron's like, no, I'm just going to tell you who I think is going to win. And if it's the favorite, sorry, the favorite wins 33% of the time anyways. But then for him to come through 8 for 14 and have a $23 on top winner, I was like, that was like the cherry on top of that Sunday for him.
I'm telling you, man, that the thing that people don't take into account, we talked about this last weekend, stakes winners often pay less than claiming winners, than allowance winners, because you have generally smaller fields. I mean, one of the fields we're going to talk about today has had 5 horses in it. I mean, you just don't get these big fields all the time in these major races, and you often have the favorite win because you don't have as much trip trouble. You don't have as many people pressing the pace in certain instances. So if you're authentic and you get a solo lead, you're going to be able to wire the field. I mean, there's certain situations. You also have, let's be honest, more consistent horses. Stakes horses generally show up with their A game 85% of the time, 80% of the time. And so you have a good idea of how good everybody is, whereas a claiming horse can jump from one barn to another. Allowance horse can be doing something for the second time. And you have these different angles that you can use to project improvement. Where in stakes races, you're really you don't get that many chances to project improvement, because the only people you really project improvement for are second off the layoff, third off the layoff, or horses trying something for the first time. But that's as much of a negative as it can be a positive.
It's also hard too. All great points, and it's also difficult when every bettor is going to be focusing on the stakes races. So you're going to have a lot more eyes looking at something, and definitely from a experienced handicapper's perspective, I'm coming into that going, well, I know what all of these horses are capable of doing, or almost all of them. So I already have a better idea of things. Whereas if you're giving me one of those, New Jersey bred waiver claiming races, I'm like, yeah. I've heard of two of these sires. Like, I don't know what the hell's happening here. So it really, like, your nuts and bolts as a handicapper, like Aaron, like yourself, like you guys, you get it where it really matters at those low-level claiming races where you can really get those prices, and you specifically, you're great at pinpointing. Well, this horse has been very inconsistent, but here's why this horse is going to pop right now. So, congrats to everybody. It was a really great experience, and of course, congrats to Aaron for cashing that. On today's show, we're going to be looking at Monmouth Park and Saratoga, some of the races that we liked there, some things we can take away. Of course, we have the Haskell to talk about, the Kentucky Oaks, the prep race, which is the CCA Oaks, all of that. Let's get into it, Mike. Riders up. All right, kicking things off, we're going to go ahead and look at the feature race of the weekend, race 12 at Monmouth Park on Saturday, July 18th. It's the Grade 1 $1 million TVG.com Haskell Stakes. This is already a Breeders' Cup winning year in for the Longines Classic. Also, this year is a Kentucky Derby prep race, and going into this, it was down to 2 horses to win, 3 horses to finish in the top 2. That's what you got here. There's a lot to unpack, and we might be on a similar wavelength here with one of these horses. I'm really willing to give Dr. Post a pass, but before we get to him, Authentic gets the win, goes gate to wire. and in the live feed, the live stream, I said, this all comes down to, does Authentic get out of the gate? If he gets out of the gate cleanly, he's got this one. If he doesn't, that's where you can really look for something to happen. And because he's had enough problems in his past, Mike, you would expect, well, it's definitely, he's not a home run single. So he gets the job done. New York Traffic made it look real close there at the end, misses just by a nose. Tell me what you thought about the top 2.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm going to be more critical of Authentic than I will Dr. Post for this race, which is kind of wild considering Authentic won the race and Dr. Post ended up running third. But, Authentic got everything his own way. He was out there by a length, setting reasonable fractions. They weren't slow, but they weren't fast. And it was stretching the rest of the field out enough that it made it harder for someone to close into him. Although, New York Traffic almost got the job done right there. But he just looked like he hit a wall coming down the stretch and was just almost out of gas when that happened. And it was one of those things where you're like, all right, if this is Authentic and we have to stretch out going to the Kentucky Derby, then I'm not sure how you really get excited about this horse trying to do any more distance when you have literally everything go his own way. And he's able to nose out New York Traffic for the Haskell win. Now, he won the Haskell. Congratulations. That is awesome. But we're talking about the future. That's the big thing here, right? And so, at 2-5 with an easy lead, with everything your own way, you got to be more dominant than that if you want to keep playing this horse in the future. And one of those things that I'm going to take away from this is what I was just doing going into it. I'm going to fade Authentic next time he comes out, especially if it's the Derby. I mean, he is not going to be on any ticket in any superfecta for me in the Derby, and definitely not in any of the multi-race wagers. I don't see how he can win if he has a contested lead and he has to go longer. It's just not a good combination for him.
Yeah, that was the big thing. We all said, mile on the 16th, you and I are definitely on record of saying we think that's his limit. He hit a mile and an eighth here, but he wasn't facing an Honor AP, and everybody else on the live feed was like, well, how good is Honor AP if he just, beat Authentic by a few lengths, and look what Authentic did. Their horse is going different directions. Honor AP, the longer you go, the more you want to play him, and Authentic, you want him shorter than that. So not worried about that. If you were an Authentic supporter, after the race, Bob Baffert said, I told Mike, get him a little left-handed off the turn. And then Mike said after the race, I was just smooching at him for a while, hoping that would be enough. I didn't want to have to use the stick until I really needed to, because he's had slight problems with that in the past. And Bob said, you realize he had earplugs in, right? So Mike Smith, if you watch the replay, really watch his face. He's smooching. He's trying to give verbal cues to get him, and it's not working. And then that's why all of a sudden, he felt New York Traffic at the 16th pole. It was like, oh, shit. And then that's when he panicked and went to the whip. But also, if you watch and wonder why Mike Smith wasn't whipping him, well, that's why. He was trying to smooch at him. He just the fact that Mike Smith didn't know the horse had earplugs in, it was like, come on, and the horse isn't freaking here.
All of those things don't instill confidence. The
No.
fact that Mike Smith has to do this doesn't instill confidence. The fact that they didn't tell him there were earplugs, not a great thing, especially if they know he's not going to hit him. I mean, there's all these different things where it's like, yeah, okay, there's an excuse, but like, that's not something that I'm like, oh, okay, well, there's why he didn't win by 5. Like, no, that's not it at all, you know? So to me, it's just all of these things are starting to pile up against Authentic. We've talked about it. I'm not sure. I'm really happy for my racehorse and everyone who bought a piece.
Yes,
I'm not sure why they sold.
Guys.
Yeah, I'm not sure why they sold any of it if they were uber confident that this horse is going to be a true Derby contender. And so that pushes me even more into that side of, okay, let's see if we can beat Authentic next time out and get a price on somebody else.
Yep, I think after a failed attempt in the Kentucky Derby, you'll probably see him show back up in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Just my opinion. New York Traffic, he was pretty one pace. He stayed there second. I will say, in the turn, it looked like he was giving out, and I thought for sure Authentic was going to win by daylight. And then I was thinking, okay, come on, Dr. Post, get second so we can get some more fantasy league points out of it.
Yep.
I will say he showed he didn't give up. He did not give up once. And I think from his other replays this year, especially the Matt Wynn, that's one thing you can say about New York Traffic. He doesn't give up. He doesn't have that really strong kick that you need to see from someone to make him a real top threat in a grade 1 race. And he doesn't have that early speed like Authentic does to really give him a chance from the get-go. So betting wise, coming into this race, I was with Aaron where I said the best you could do is second, play him in exacta. The Derby, I don't think he's going to exacta candidate necessarily, but aside from the Derby, Mike, he's at least got to be considered for an exotics play, right? At least to finish underneath.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he ran a 95 last race, improved to 100 buyer this race, the same thing that Authentic got. He shouldn't have that same distance trouble that Authentic has. I mean, I don't love him for the distance, but I don't think it's necessarily a knock on him either. And he's a horse, like you said, that's just a Johnny Tryhard. And that's a horse that can easily fill out a try or a super, especially in a field like the Derby, where we've often talked about you want to be up close. He's going to be up close. And if he's up close and you have to someone has to pass him to get third or fourth, I mean, he's going to be trying all the way to the wire. And that's what you are looking for when you're trying to find good prices in supers. And I don't see him going off as a low price. I think you're still getting 15, 20 to 1 on Derby Day, maybe even more than that, to be honest. And if you're getting that type of price, I think this is a good horse to be using in the third and the fourth slot in your tries and your supers. I think it's going to be awfully hard for him to run first or second. But, I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you could see horses fade late, not get a good trip. I mean, look at like Game Winner, for instance, who I think was one of the best in last year's Derby, get a terrible trip, didn't break, ended up running 5th, right? So there's a lot of different reasons why some of the top horses may not be up there. And this is one where you would expect it's going to get a relatively good trip, and it loves to try. And those are two great things to be looking for in a long shot.
You also, with a jockey like Paco Lopez, if he stays aboard for the Derby, Paco's not a jockey that gives up.
No.
Paco's 10 lengths out at the top of the stretch and going, we got this. So a good thing to consider for somebody to finish underneath. All right, let's talk about our boy, Dr. Post. And yes, full disclosure, Mike and I have him on our fantasy league. We've been very high on this horse since we picked him up. Not the best of starts. And I think that's where I want to start with him is I didn't love that he was on the rail. Didn't get to talk about it much on the live stream, but I didn't like that he was on the rail because you knew Authentic just to his outside was going to go and cut over. And then who else is going to follow and try and cut over? So he doesn't break that well. It looked like he bumped the stall slightly. And then he gets stuck behind Jesus's team or Jesus's team, however you want to pronounce it. He is the only horse that made up any ground. And yes, that's part of that is because Authentic is distance limited and New York Traffic doesn't have a strong turn of foot, but he didn't give up. He didn't quit. And I thought, considering he got buried way behind the horses early on, he made a mild effort. He still has a shit ton of improving to do if he wants to make any kind of threat in the Kentucky Derby. But I thought this was a better effort than looking back at it today than I did on Saturday. What are your thoughts?
I'm happy that Joe Bravo will not be riding him in the Derby. That's my thought. It's one of those where, like, you're right, didn't get out of the gate. That's knock number one. This is just the classic shuffled back. He just got shuffled every step of the way, was getting pinched, didn't fight for position. And then when he actually got started to roll, he actually looked like he was closing, but there was no chance he was ever going to really make up any ground after where he was in the first turn. One of the reasons we like this horse is the tactical speed. The tactical speed was completely ditched on Saturday. Because if you know Authentic's going to go, you should almost ride a little bit harder to protect the rail a little bit more and get the first seat right behind him, run the pocket. And the way that he was ridden, it was, he brushed the gate, so that you can't knock Bravo for that, but he doesn't get out cleanly, and then he doesn't get into the right spot, and then he allows himself to get shuffled back, and then he makes a 4 wide run. It's just, It's like, no, this is not the trip that this horse needs to be able to win the race. And I like the fact that he still fought back. I like the fact that he tried to close the ground on the top two. It wasn't the race I wanted to see from him, but it also is one of those where you look at it and you're like, there's enough things that just went quirky here that I'm not going to hold this against him. And I still think he is on the short list for me of horses I think can win the Derby. Now, it would take a great improvement, and I'm not as excited as I was before this race. But again, I mean, we're going from Bravo to Arad. Like, that's a massive upgrade.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's one of the big things here. And it's just, I wasn't happy with the ride. I wasn't happy with the way that the first turn went. And after that, I didn't think he really had a shot at winning the race.
I'm going to back off as far as a Derby win candidate for me. I think that against these types of horses, if he was really strong enough, he would have done better or figured it out. He doesn't have that raw natural talent that makes him an elite world beater. If we're looking at other graded races beyond the Kentucky Derby, sure, I think this is a great candidate. He's still a Todd Pletcher trainee. He's still progressing very well through the summer. So we can take a look and see what happens later with that. I do want to look at the Kentucky Derby rankings for the Derby wager, which we have. So I'll put that up on the screen right now. And then what you're going to see here, Mike, this is off of racenews.com. So if you want to see how Kentucky Derby future wager pool 6 ended, you can go right here to check it out. Let's look at how everything fits in from a picture. So you see Authentic is going to come in here. He's 9-1. Art Collector I thought was interesting. He wins the Bluegrass and he goes from 9-2 to 8-1. He went backwards. But if you look at these odds, Mike, I mean, we really didn't change much of anything. Dr. Post fell a little bit, but he was 20-1 to begin with. Honor AP's 5-1, 6-1. Tis the Law's 5-2. Uncle Chuck 6-1. So looking at what we had here for this field, where do they fit in with the other Derby candidates here?
Do you mean where do the horses from the Haskell fit in?
Yes, sorry, the Haskell horses. Where do they fit in?
I mean, man,
it's not great.
No, I wouldn't. Dr. Post is the only one I would consider to win the race. And
it's funny because he was 24-1 and New York Traffic got second, almost won. He's 19-1. So a little difference there. Yeah.
And I mean, I have Dr. Post at 88-1. So I wouldn't be betting 24-1 because I don't think that's a very good number on him. And I think that's probably about what he goes off at Derby Day. I think that's what a lot of people have to look at this and say, okay, what price is the horse going to actually go off on Derby Day? What type of value am I getting? Look at the offshore books. What type of value is there? I know, in the fixed odds market right now, you can get 2-1 on Tis the Law. So you're looking at a little bit better value here. But if you want to bet Tis the Law in the Derby, I would almost recommend betting Will Anyone Win the Triple Crown? Because the Will Anyone Win the Triple Crown is plus 450. And if he wins the Derby, he's
going to the Preakness as a heavy favorite.
A heavy. And who's else going to go there? All the best horses are going to skip it for the Breeders' Cup. Mm-hmm. So to me, I mean, if you're looking at Tis the Law, the best value is actually finding somewhere that will accept the Triple Crown bet. Because if he wins the second leg, I think he's going to be a monster favorite, 1-9, 1-5 type favorite in the third leg. And then you're getting some value there. I mean, for me, it's tough on these because, like Uncle Chuck at 8-1 is another one I would consider, but 8-1 is an awfully tough price to take on a horse that is going to run in the Travers. If he gets blown out, that 8-1 is going to look like 60-1 real fast, and he might not even be going into the gate. So that's why these future racers are so tricky to me. It's why I also like the fixed odds. If you do have a way to get a bet in on a fixed odds side, I think that is the better way to do it versus these pools because you don't always know what they're going to close at and when the late money is going to come in and how that's going to fluctuate the numbers either for or against you.
Yeah, and that's going to be an interesting topic to revisit in just a minute here when we look at the Kentucky Oaks future wagering and how that went. We'll move on now and talk about the CCA Oaks, the Coaching Club American Oaks at Saratoga. Yeah, the field of 5, it got shrunk down pretty bad here, and not just because it only went from 6 to 5, but the horse you and I were both really excited about when we covered this in our sequence last week, all top scratch. I would have loved to have seen her in here. Instead, you get the 2 horses that are owned by the WinStar Syndicate Group, banging heads the length of the stretch. Paris Lights gets the win over Crystal Ball. You and I was using Paris Lights in my pick 4 sequence. I think once Altaf scratch, you probably might have migrated over to Paris Lights for a single. I'm just happy Crystal Ball didn't win because on the show I said how much I hated this horse and she almost damn near beat me again. Happy that didn't happen. I was happy with Paris Lights progression. Tell me about your thoughts.
I would love to go to Vegas, Sean. Unfortunately, I don't think that's in the cards right now. I think that you hit the nail on the head. And across the board, the entire Dudes team was against Tunnelless Shape. This is the case of a horse coming from Florida who had beaten really one horse in all of those races that she had won. And this time she was in over her head, and the price was ridiculous considering who she had faced and who she had beaten in the past. And she just wasn't able to stack up against this field, even with who I think was probably the best horse scratching out. I ended up singling the Parasites as well. And, that it's just a situation where those two horses stood out on paper to me. And I wasn't a big fan of the Baffert coming in. We talked about it on the show on Thursday about that. And it just, to me, that horse who ran a heck of an effort, like very impressive, going 2 turns and running really well. But just for me, it was not what you wanted in that spot. And I think the price on the 6 was actually pretty good. And it was a pretty easy single on the card in my mind. And that she lived up to it. Parasites ran very, very well. And it's going to be interesting seeing where these horses go. And I'm not sure, Crystal Ball and Parasites, you got to think, are both headed to the Oaks. Mm-hmm. I'm really interested to see where Altif shows up. Altaf shows up, because I don't know if you were following Twitter, and Bob Baffert got his first Twitter win of the weekend. So now he's got 100 grade stakes and a Twitter win. Someone from DRF tweeted about Altif scratching out and saying,
you mean Chad Brown?
Chad Brown, yeah. Who did I say?
You said Bob Baffert.
Yeah, my bad. Never mind. Bob Baffert's still on zero on Twitter. Chad Brown.
Chad Brown, who trains Altaf, which is why you brought him up.
Yeah, so Altaf was someone on DRF mentioned, oh, well, everyone who backed Altaf's really lucky she's not running. And Chad Brown retweeted a very funny gif to it, like, oh, really? Like, just wait till you see what she actually has. I'm interested to see where this horse shows up now, because he clearly thinks this horse is a monster, or else he's not throwing shade at DRF on Twitter for scratching the horse.
Yeah, that was. I'm gonna have to figure out where that. I'm gonna see if I can pull that GIF up real quick, because I saw that too, and I went.
I sent it to the text thread. I was like, "Oh, really? Really? You like him that much, huh?"
yeah. Here, I'll pull it up real quick on the screen. Yeah, it's too bad we didn't get to see her, because, man, we were really excited about Altaf, and even people were asking like, "Oh, well, how do you know this was going to be such a great one?" And we said on the show that. Like Altaf, like Chad Brown's pattern is telling you that this horse is going to potentially be a monster, because he was comparing her to Guarana. He was taking her on the same route that he took with Guarana last year. So the fact that we don't get to see her here, it does make you wonder, though, where we're going to see her pop up, because she doesn't have too many opportunities left to try and qualify for the Kentucky Oaks, and she has 0 points because she just broke her maiden. So it'll be interesting to see where we go from here. Which
is even crazier to me that you scratch her out of this race. Like, it just shows so much confidence. If that's his response, and she actually is that good, scratching out of this race, which was not the water wasn't that deep here. We're still in the shallow end in this field.
Right.
I mean, it's surprising, because she does need the points, like you said.
Yeah, she. If I remember correctly, the report was that she wasn't training. There just was something a little off that he felt about it. So I'm looking. There are 3 races left that are Kentucky Oaks points worth, and only 2 of them can get you enough to get in the gate. You have the Monmouth Oaks on August 1st, 50 points to the winner, so she would have to win that to qualify. And then the Alabama Stakes, and that's 140. So if she got top 2, theoretically, she would qualify based off of those. If she scratches out of the CCA and goes to the Alabama or even the Monmouth Oaks, I mean, look out.
If she's in the Alabama, it will be hard for me not to single that horse, just because the confidence that shows is especially for someone like Chad Brown, who doesn't always go maiden to grade 1. I mean, that's a huge leap of confidence for this horse. So, I mean, we'll see where she ends up, but she's definitely one that you keep an eye on. And if you can get any sort of price, I mean, definitely worth putting a few shekels on it. And that's, that was the thing with Parasites for me. I was shocked we got 2-1 in this spot. And, I actually ended up playing this triple cold, which was kind of nice, because if you leave the 1 out, it actually paid. I mean, it paid $42 for a buck triple. And it wasn't like it was that hard to get to. The 2 horse was 8-1, and you had a 2-1 over a 3-1 in the first 2 spots. And as long as you were willing to get rid of tonalist shape, you could really make some money on this race.
And then we're going to take a quick look at how the Kentucky Oaks future wager pool ended up on the screen here. Even though she scratches Altaf, 30-1 morning line bet down to 17-1. This whole table, by the way, there were some real wacky numbers. I kept double checking to make sure that I wasn't going cross-eyed when I was filling these in yesterday, because some of these I didn't quite understand some of the leaps and bounds. Gamine 9-5, 2-1. Nobody seems to care that she had that second positive drug test that confirmed what happened at Oaklawn Park, because nothing came out of the Acorn Stakes and she ran like a monster there. Speech loses a little bit of steam. She drops from 8-1 to 10-1. Yeah, again, like Art Collector, there's a little bit of a recency bias here. We're forgetting what just happened the weekend prior.
Yeah. No, it's surprising to me. I mean, Speech ran really well, and should be around the same price as Swiss Skydiver if you're looking at like horses that they've competed with. I mean, if we're using, if we're using Venetian Harbor as a common enemy, right? As a common horse they both run against, Swiss Skydiver and Speech both ran the same distance behind her. So now I know Swiss Skydiver, you have her going against the boys, and so people really kind of going to gravitate toward that. But there's definitely an overlay there if you're getting double the price on Speech versus Swiss Skydiver. Also,
I would argue the Speech is still doing a little bit of an upward trajectory. Swiss Skydiver, I think we've seen her best. Now, granted, her best is phenomenal. Her best would win the Kentucky Oaks Prize 7 or 8 times out of 10, but you do know what you're going to get with her Speech. There's a little bit more upside, and that's where the value comes in at 10-1. Tonalist shape. She runs like crap and still 30-1, bet down to 19-1. By the way, I saw these odds after we recorded the podcast, and I thought this right here should have been a tip
giveaway
that Tonalist shape was going to run terribly when a filly who's only lost once, and that was the Swiss Skydiver, who was, your second choice. She opens at 30-1. Like, somebody knew this horse isn't actually probably that good, and I should have saved myself a bullet. Maybe I could have hit that pick 4, adding a horse in the earlier sequence if I'd singled up.
Yeah, and when you look at these two future wagers, I mean, to me, I would much rather take a big time stab here. I think this is where if you're going to play a long shot, maybe even like Harvey's Little Goyle, or someone who is in the 20 to 30-1 range, I think taking that shot, even Bonnie South, who did not run a lick, but could come back and run well. Taking a swing at a horse here makes a lot more sense than us taking a swing at a horse in the Derby to me. I don't think you're going to see a bomb win the Derby. If Gamine doesn't make the gate, if Gamine faces pace pressure, like there's a bunch of different ways this race could get wonky. And if you have Swiss Skydiver and Gamine both go into the lead, if you have you could see a horse pick up the pieces here. I think this is the division. If you're looking to bet a future bet and you're looking to try and find a real bomb, I think the fillies is where you look, not the boys this year.
Well, the thing that stood out to me about Gamine is I had this discussion with somebody on Twitter over the weekend. If you think she's going to win the Kentucky Oaks, do you really think you're going to get better than 2-1 on her there? Like, I would just wait until the day of, because there's no value here at 2-1. I mean, what is she going to be sub even money in the Kentucky Oaks? It's hard to say so. She's going to be, in the test stakes, which is a 1-turn race before she goes out to it. So she's going in without having won at 2 turns in a stakes race. And yet you were willing to take 2-1 a month and a half out without knowing anything that could happen, without knowing, is she going to test positive for something again? So pretty wacky.
Yeah, I mean, when you a month and a half out you have to assume that any horse is about 50-50 to make it into the gate, maybe 60-40. Because it's 6 weeks away and you have no clue what's going to happen in training, no clue what's going to happen in the test, no clue if there's going to be a tweak, if there's going to be a positive test. You also haven't seen the PPs. You have no idea how the pace is going to set up, how the race is going to set up. There's
where she's going to draw.
Yeah, there's all these factors that go into the race day price that you have zero knowledge of. And if she doesn't make the gate, you lose. So, I mean, to me, I want at least double or triple the race day price if I'm going to play a future pool, because that is where you're starting to get the value. And when you get this close to the race, it's tough to get that type of value because the favorites are going to be pretty dialed in. So you really have to be able to find someone who you like that is 30-1, that maybe 10-1 on race day because they have one more prep before one of these two big races.
And once again, if you want to see those charts for the Derby or Future Wager or the Oaks Future Wager in full, just go to racenews.com. It is right here. It's right on our homepage. I try to make it easy for you folks. All you got to do is don't click on your screen, because that's actually not going to work for you. And I know a couple of you just tried to do that, but don't worry about that.
I love the production value. You're just upping your game. I mean, we have this video intro now. You're just pulling things up. You got Twitter up. I mean, everything's just coming in here now.
Listen, as long as Jared's not editing, we're never going to half-ass it here. That's how that works. We'll move on to the third topic / race to discuss. We're going to look at the Monmouth Cup, which is the 10th race at Monmouth Park. And the big reason we want to bring this up, Mike, is I was very heavy on Global Campaign, who was the winner. He was one of Aaron's 8 top choice winners out of 14 on the card. And we got this Twitter question from one of our followers, Darren Sipes. He says, what do you like to see when a horse stretches out from 8 furlongs to 9 furlongs and vice versa? And that's what we were getting here with Global Campaign. He was, as a 3-year-old, he ran well at 1 mile and 1/8. He won the Peter Pan Stakes. He was 2nd or 3rd in the Jim Dandy, I think 3rd. And then he had a couple of 1-turn races to start 2020. And yeah, he was the 5-2 favorite. That was partially because Bodie Express scratched at the last second. But this was, to me, Mike, was a classic example of a horse getting back to what they're doing best. And it was 2 sprints into a route to try and get him ready. Mm-hmm. This seemed almost like a no-brainer pick here. I was very happy with the result, but I made 2 bets on the day, and this was one of them because I thought this is a clear winner. What did you think?
I was pissed I didn't single. I went Ball Harbor and Global Campaign. I was too deep in that race. I wish I had singled Global Campaign for all the reasons you said. And Darren brings up an interesting point. So what are you looking for going 8 to 9 or even 9 to 8? You know, when you're going through this, the number one thing you look for is past precedents. What have they done in the past at these distances, and how set up are they to run the distance? Right, going up 1.125 miles off the bench, 1.25 miles off the bench. Very difficult. Like you mentioned, we had 2 sprints to the route here. The horse's stamina was built up. They weren't just jumping right down, right into the teeth of a grade 1 going 1.25 miles. That is incredibly difficult to do. The build up of the stamina is going to give them a better chance of being able to win the race. The other key is really the breeding. And this is what I kind of lean on when I don't have any, I've never seen the horse go 1.1 miles, even Authentic, which we were talking about. In the Mischief, I'm not really looking at 1.25 miles. That's why we talk about him in the Derby and saying this is not necessarily a distance we look for. City Zip's another one where they start going too long on the dirt. I'm not really as interested. The turf, City Zips can actually hold pretty well, but on the dirt, I don't really want a City Zip going deep into 2 turns. And so if you have the past precedent, that's always the best thing to look at. Have they run at this distance before? How did they do? How did they do it a little bit shorter? Were they able to close? What was the last furlong in the shorter race? Did they close in 12s, or was it a 14-second final furlong? Because if it's 14 seconds, you're assuming they're not going very quickly, and probably another furlong isn't quite what they want, right? Whereas if they run the final furlong in 11 seconds, there's a little bit more in the tank there. So you can look at the last furlong or the last 2 furlongs of the previous races at the shorter distances if they haven't run that before. But really, for me, a lot of it is, you know, are they by Curlin? Are they by Uncle Mo? Are they by Tabit? Like, who's the dad? Who's the mom? And who's the broodmare sire? And do those lines specifically instill confidence in me when I'm looking at 9 and 10 furlong races, especially when stretching out from 7 or 8 furlong races. And it also depends too. Make sure you keep an eye on, is it a 2-turn mile? Is it a 1-turn mile? That does make a big difference as well.
Yeah, that's a great point especially when you're looking at the 1-turn things. That's something that old me wouldn't have necessarily picked up on. So that's a good. Can you hear my dogs in the background?
Just a little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah, we got guest stars today.
We got guest stars. We've never had to do this live before. I'll be right back. I need to go tell them to shut up. So you go ahead and vamp for a second, and I'll be right back.
I'm not even sure how to vamp.
Okay, I'll prompt you with something here real quick. Hopefully you can hear it. Global Campaign was one of my 3 stars of the week because you watched Jovia was fighting with him tooth and nail, pressed him, faded badly. Ball Harbor came in. He repelled that bid. Like, this horse kept taking challenges and kept repelling people to try and get away. And I thought it's just as impressive as anything else as what he did.
Yeah, I mean, we should also talk about Vargas in the ride too. I mean, I bashed on Bravo earlier, specifically about how he didn't get the horse up into position, and he was breaking from the 1 post, and he wasn't able to really engage with the horse and push him forward. Well, Vargas did the exact opposite here. He pushed him forward and ended up actually taking the lead and having the lead for a large portion of this race. But if he had gone the opposite route and he had faded back and kind of deferred to some of the horses on just his outside, he gets in that shuffle. He ends up 4 lengths, 5 lengths, 6 lengths back. And Global Campaign doesn't want to be coming from 6, 7 lengths back. So Vargas setting him up in a good position early from that 1 post and doing exactly what Joe Bravo didn't do on Dr. Post. Even though he went for the lead, which is not something Global Campaign had done before, he didn't let him get shuffled in that first turn by pushing him forward. And that was a big key to the race. And that's something you got to really, really commend Vargas for doing, is that he knew that he had enough horse, but he did not want to be, 6th, 8 back. That's just not a very good spot to be in.
I saw it, and Sean, I know you're watching it. You might have been the one to retweet it or something, but Vargas was screaming weight room afterwards, talking about how strong he was and how big of an effort that was. So I thought, and that was his first. I think this was his first big graded stakes win, either at Monmouth Park or ever. I'll have to look that up, but I thought that was a pretty great story too. So anyway, as far as getting back to Darren's question, a lot of what we're looking at is breeding. Past performances can tell you one thing, but if you don't have that available, look at the breeding, look at what the trainer's been doing, especially even though it was a mile race in his last effort. It's a 1-turn mile. Look for those 2 sprints to a route angles to see what's going to get them ready and get them, moving forward for their big test. All right, Mike, the last thing we're going to talk about, you had asked about the turf at Saratoga. You wanted to talk about it. I'll just real quick talk about the fact that Joel Rosario and Christophe Clement, man, they had themselves a weekend. Take both of the greatest stakes races on turf, both Saturday and Sunday. Great rides. Decorated Invader might be the best 3-year-old on dirt or turf. I can't wait to see. At this point, I put it in the 3 stars. He's pretty much just a free bet until free square until you get to the Breeders' Cup, because there's not a 3-year-old on turf right now that can come close to touching him. So talk about and maybe not necessarily Decorated Invader specifically because we know he's good, but the Saratoga turf course and how it changed over the first weekend here.
Yeah, so there's two turf courses. There's the inner or the melon and the inner turf course. So you have two separate turf courses there. And one thing that I noticed, and one thing that I want to make sure I specifically mention here, we always talk about track biases, and I'm not a huge track bias guy, but every now and then you notice that it's just a common theme, a trend that you're seeing. We had 0 wire-to-wire winners on the turf, sprints or routes at Saratoga, which is extremely rare when the turf is quote-unquote firm. And when you look at the times, you can kind of tell the turf isn't really firm. It's kind of more because there was quite a bit of rain. It's kind of more of the, I'm going to go with the good to soft to good. And it got core good at the end of the week. It's 100 degrees up here today. It's 93, something like that. But it's dry. And so it's going to soak the moisture up. We're supposed to get thunderstorms, though, the next 2 days. And if we get those thunderstorms, so this is something to keep an eye on the weather for everybody who doesn't have anything to do on a Wednesday and Tuesday and Wednesday before we reopen here on Thursday. Keep an eye on the weather. If it does rain, I would expect the turf course to play slow again. You were seeing 24 and change first quarters, 49 and change halves, and horses quitting. Everyone was winning from off the pace. And there's a couple instances where you had horses because of really funky stretch runs. And I'm talking about, like, look at the first race on Sunday for a funky stretch run, that they were able to re-rally and win, but no one wired the field. You had a lot of these lone speeds that it didn't matter. They got a comfortable length lead and they could not kick and close. I mean, it was a heavy turf and not forgiving for horses in the front. And if we get rain the next 2 days, you can expect the same thing again this weekend. And you really should be focusing more on horses that are coming from off the pace. I would not rely on speed, which for me is kind of the opposite of how I usually handicap. So It's something that I want to look for when I do see closers really doing well. And especially, in a place where you have Rosario and you have Brown, I mean, it's going to feed toward that jockey and those horses, that jockey and that trainer. Those horses are going to have a very high percentage when you have a turf course that's playing toward how they train and how they ride.
It's interesting with Decorated Invader because if you look at just the running line, it says that he was in second until he got to first. He was, 7.5 lengths back from Get Smoking at one point. So in that case, that you're saying speed, you're not counting, even though he was second, you're not counting Decorated Invader as speed, right? Because he still had to close a lot of ground. Even if there weren't horses in his way, he still had to close up. And that plays along with what you're talking about they're not being able to hold on to speed.
Yeah, exactly. And the 3-horse there, I think, ended up finishing third in that race or second, one of the two. But that's one of the few examples where you even saw speed held going 2 turns. I mean, it was a closer's paradise all weekend on the turf at Saratoga. And there was we were doing the pod on Thursday, and it was an opening day, and I had the 4-horse and a turf sprint, and the horse looked home and just gave it up the last 16th of a mile. And that's what you consistently saw, is horses were getting caught later in the races. And because of that, when you see things like that, you've really got to focus on, okay, I need to adjust my handicapping, because one of the best ways to find long shots, and it's funny if you look at NHC last year, if you look at one of the best ways to find long shots, lone speed on the turf. And if you don't necessarily have that lone speed on the turf angle, you've got to rejigger how you're going to actually work it out and figure out how am I going to find some prices? I now need to focus more on horses that are coming from off the pace and switch it up a little bit. So I mean, it's definitely interesting to figure out how we're gonna work it here at Saratoga. And I think the rains are going to come, and it is going to be another heavy turf course. So be careful if it says firm, it's not necessarily firm.
It's like a European firm, right? Like I've had this discussion before in the Santa Anita press box, and Steve Anderson works for DRF. It goes overseas a lot, so he's very familiar with that. So we would ask him, like, "Well, Santa Anita's good. What is that in Europe? Or what does a Chantilly, good mean?" He's like, "That means it's yielding over here." Yeah. So you get used to that sort of thing.
That also brings up a good point. You probably want to move the Europeans up, especially ones that were running in California on firmer turf. They're now coming to Saratoga. I mean, it's same with Florida. If a horse is performing well at Gulfstream's turf, may not be the best horse to have at Saratoga's turf, because they're going to be completely different surfaces. So there's certain things like that you need to take into account too, where if maybe they ran well in Europe, ran poorly at Gulfstream, maybe you're going to get a price at Saratoga because of that correlation between how those turfs play.
All right, that's going to wrap things up. Thanks so much for joining Mike and I as we went through the weekend that was at Monmouth Park and Saratoga. Hopefully we were able to give you some insight, maybe some handicapping tools, talking about the distance thing and what to look for horses stretching out or cutting back. Playing Saratoga this week, which is going to be, they're starting on Wednesday this week, so you've got 5 days of Saratoga coming up. So hopefully Mike's a little insight into the turf and the weather is helping out. By the way, make sure you're following us on Twitter. You can make sure that you're getting all those weather reports and more from Mike Somich. I am at Curtis Kellaward. He is at SummerBomb18. Number 1, number 8 corporate overlords are at Racing_Dudes. Once more, I want to give a quick shout out. It sounds like I'm kissing up to him. Aaron Haltzman, congratulations. That was a really tremendous job you did with the Monmouth Park guide. Real happy for that. I'm also really happy, Mike. We're taking a week off from the guides. We've had a lot of guides lately, and it's a lot of work for Aaron, and the poor guy's trying to move into a new house. I'm trying to manage the website, and it's just, there's a lot happening. So I'm really happy we're taking a week. We still have some great races coming up, though, because we've got the Vanderbilt, which is a grade 1 for 3-year-olds. And up 6 furlongs on the dirt, so that'll be a great race to watch. The Ballston Spa on Saturday, that's supposed to be the big return of Sister Charlie, so you know you've got to get pumped up for that. A couple of good races at Woodbine. Del Mar is coming back as well. Del Mar is going to be running Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday because we lost last weekend. All of the stakes, all of the races from last weekend are being held this weekend, so they're moving things around. Should have 4 really great days of betting. I've already looked at the Friday and Saturday cards at Del Mar. Looks pretty damn great, and finally, we get to see Maximum Security. We had to wait one more week, but we're finally about to see Maximum Security come back to San Diego. It'll
be interesting to see him. I mean, the Vanderbilt was Chancelot's coming out party, so now to see Maximum Security debuting the same weekend a year later, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with him and how he shows up. And all reports are he looks amazing at Del Mar. Everything I've heard people just glowing about how well that horse looks in the paddock when it's schooling and how it's training. Like supposedly it's all systems go for Mr. Baffert. Like he needs another good horse.
Also Saturday, this girl, Lazy Daisy,
hey.
She's going to be on this. She's trying the turf for the first time in the San Clemente, which is restricted to 3-year-olds since a grade 2. So we'll see how that goes. It can't really go much worse than her last race did at the Churchill Downs on the dirt, but hopefully she's. It sounds like she's doing fine, and she's been working out pretty well on the turf actually out there. So we'll take a look at that. So make sure you check out racingnews.com. We'll have previews of every stakes race coming up this week, throughout the week, and then on the weekend. And of course, make sure you're following us for that. Blinkers Off will be back later this week, as will Mike and I on Thursday, same time at 2:30 Pacific, 5:30 Eastern. Mike, do you have an idea of where you want to cover yet? We've got Del Mar, Saratoga, both look like good options here.
It'll be one or the other. We'll do bombs at one. We'll do the late pick 4 at the other.
Sister Charlie or Maximum Security? Which one do you want to talk about more? Because
oh God, which do I not want to single? Let's go. Let's talk about Maximum Security. So then I can single Sister Charlie in the bombs.
There you go. I mean, I was going to say, you're going to want to, if you don't single Sister Charlie. You
kind of have to at this point. I mean,
the only way you
maybe
don't.
Maybe it's the return race, so you can make an argument, but
the only way you don't is if she's in the, if she's in that race, what is it? The King George VI and the Queen Elizabeth Stakes at Ascot on Saturday, which is a Breeders' Cup win and you're in. Here's who's in this field. Anthony Van Dyke, Enable, Fanny Logan, Japan, Magic Wand, Sir Dragonet, and Sovereign. The 5th place horse is going to win the Breeders' Cup out of this race. Like that, yeah. That's an insane, like that's like Breeders' Cup plus Ascot level field right there.
I literally feel so bad for Magic Wand. Like this horse it's never faced anything but giants and just runs all these heart races and runs second and thirds. And it's just like, someone cut her break. Like, can we just,
she's the modern day Sham at this point.
Yeah.
Like Sham would have had all these records if it wasn't for a damn horse named Sarah.
Wrong time, wrong place, man.
Exactly.
It's all about the timing, right? It's crazy. Yeah.
Maybe she'll be like the best blue hen mare that's ever lived after this. Like they're like, listen, every horse that's come out of her has won the New Guineas and has won the Epsom Derby and the Kentucky Derby all in the same year.
I guess we shouldn't feel too bad for her and her ownership. I mean, she has made a couple bucks running all those seconds in those races.
That's true. It's one of those horses.
Okay.
It's kind of like, not so much now, but at the time when in his 3-year-old season, Looking at Lee was one of those horses. If you owned him, man, second in the Kentucky Derby, second, third, every single damn race, you just as a bettor, God, you hate to play him.
Yeah.
You see the name, and you're like, God, you again.
Yeah.
Well, on Thursday, you can say the same thing. You again when you join us here live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Periscope. Thanks so much for joining us. Until then, this has been another episode of the Magic Mike Show. Thank you so much. I'm Magic.
And I'm Mike.
We'll see you guys next time. And I didn't have the video queued up. Excuse me.
The Magic Mike Show, where you hear the experts speak. The Magic Mike Show. Tune into the show every week. The Magic Mike Show. You can trust the show is the bomb because it's being brought to you by RacingDudes.com.